It was a bright morning in Dallas, Texas. The sun had just come up, painting the streets gold. The smell of fresh coffee filled the Turner family's small but cozy kitchen. Michael Turner, a 38-year-old father of two, sat at the table tying his shoes. His wife, Emma, was making pancakes, humming softly. Their two kids, Liam and Sophie, were laughing, fighting over who got the bigger pancake. For Michael, mornings like this were everything. He looked at his family and smiled. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good. He had worked at a construction company for nearly 10 years. The pay wasn't great, but it was steady. They had a small home, a second-hand car, and dreams of buying a better one someday. "Hey, Dad," Liam said with a grin. "If I get straight A's this year, will you buy me a bike?" Michael laughed. "If you get straight A's, I'll buy you 2 bikes." Emma smiled as she poured syrup on their plates. "Don't make promises you can't keep," she teased. Michael kissed her cheek and said, "You'll see, Em. This year will be different. I can feel it." He didn't know how wrong he was. When Michael reached work, something felt off. The usually busy construction site was quiet. Workers stood around, whispering. Then, his boss, Mr. Collins, walked out of the office, holding a folder. His face looked pale. "Everyone, can I have your attention, please?" Mr. Collins said. "I wish I had better news, but the company's shutting down. Effective today." The words hit Michael like a brick. "What do you mean, shutting down?" someone shouted. Mr. Collins sighed. "The owner went bankrupt. The bank's taking over everything." "I'm sorry." Michael felt his knees weaken. 10 years of hard work gone. He had bills to pay, a mortgage, and 2 kids counting on him. He drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel until his hands hurt. When he reached home, Emma was watering the plants. She turned to smile at him, but her smile faded when she saw his face. "What happened?" she asked softly. Michael sat on the porch steps. "They closed down the company. No notice. No severance. Just, gone." Emma froze. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of children playing down the street felt like another world. Finally, she sat beside him. "We'll figure something out," she said, though her voice trembled. He nodded, trying to believe it. That afternoon, Michael called the bank. He had missed 2 mortgage payments already. He thought maybe they could give him some time. But the voice on the other end was cold and mechanical. "Mr. Turner, if you cannot pay by next Friday, we will begin foreclosure proceedings." Michael hung up, his heart pounding. He felt like the world was closing in. Still, he tried to stay calm for his family. That evening, he helped the kids with homework and pretended everything was fine. After dinner, he sat at the kitchen table, writing job applications. He filled out one after another, but deep down, he knew finding work wasn't easy anymore. Then, as if fate wasn't done with him yet, it got worse. Around midnight, Michael woke up to a strange smell. Something burning. He jumped out of bed and ran toward the living room. Flames were climbing up the curtains. "Emma! Get the kids!" he yelled. Emma grabbed Liam and Sophie as smoke filled the house. The fire spread faster than Michael could think. He tried to throw water from the kitchen sink, but it was too late. By the time firefighters arrived, half the house was gone. The family stood outside in the cold, watching their home burn. Emma held the kids close, tears streaming down her face. Michael stood there, covered in ash, staring at everything he had worked for, now just smoke and ashes. When the fire chief walked over, Michael asked quietly, "Do you know how it started?" "Looks like a faulty wire in the living room," the chief said. "I'm sorry, sir." "Sorry. Everyone kept saying sorry. But sorry couldn't bring back his job. Sorry couldn't rebuild a home. That night, the Turner family slept at a neighbor's house. The kids were too young to understand. They kept asking when they could go home. Michael didn't have an answer. He sat in the dark living room, staring out the window at the burned shell of his house. Everything he had gone in a single day. His savings were tied to the company, his home was destroyed, and his job was gone. He felt empty. Lost. Emma came and sat beside him. "We'll rebuild," she whispered. Michael looked at her tired eyes. "With what, Emma?" "Hope." She took his hand. "Yes," she said softly. "With hope." Michael wanted to believe her. But hope felt far away. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, he looked out at the ruins of their home. A new day had begun, but for Michael Turner, it didn't feel like a beginning. It felt like the end. What he didn't know was that this end would soon become the start of something greater, a second chance not just for him, but for his whole family. For the next few days, the Turner family tried to stay strong. The fire had destroyed almost everything: their furniture, clothes, and most of their savings. What the flames didn't take, the smoke ruined. They moved into a small room offered by a kind neighbor, Mrs. Miller. It was small, barely enough for a bed, a sofa, and a table. But it was warm, and it was safe. For now. Michael spent his days driving around Dallas, stopping at construction sites, repair shops, and warehouses, anywhere that had a "now hiring" sign. But every time he applied, he got the same answer. "Sorry, we're full." "Sorry, no experience in this field." "Sorry, we're not hiring right now." That word "sorry" had become a wall he couldn't climb. By the second week, his phone stopped ringing. The only calls he got were from the bank, reminding him about overdue payments. One evening, Michael sat on the edge of the small bed, staring at the floor. His hands were rough from odd jobs: washing cars, mowing lawns, carrying boxes, anything he could find. But it wasn't enough. Emma tried to stay strong for the kids. She took a part-time job at a local diner. She smiled through her shifts, but at night, when the kids slept, she'd cry quietly beside Michael. "I feel like we're falling apart," she whispered one night. Michael didn't answer. He just stared at the ceiling. His silence said everything. A few days later, Michael went to visit what was left of their old house. The smell of burnt wood still filled the air. He walked through the ashes, kicking a small piece of metal. It was part of his son's old bicycle, the one Liam loved so much. He sat down on a broken wall and buried his face in his hands. For the first time, he cried. Not loud, just quiet, heavy tears that came from somewhere deep inside. He felt like he had failed as a father, as a husband, as a man. That evening, he returned to Mrs. Miller's house. The kids ran to him, their faces bright. "Dad! Dad! Guess what?" Sophie said. "Mom made your favorite soup." Michael smiled weakly. "That's great, sweetheart." He sat down at the table. The soup was thin, but warm. He watched his family eating, laughing, pretending everything was normal. But inside, he felt hollow. After dinner, Liam came close and asked softly, "Dad, are we going to be okay?" Michael froze. He wanted to say, "Yes, of course we are." He wanted to promise him the world. But he couldn't lie to his son. So, he just put his hand on Liam's shoulder and said, "I'm trying, buddy. I'm trying." Days turned into weeks. The hope that had kept Michael going began to fade. He started spending more time alone, sitting by the window, staring into nothing. The sound of children laughing outside felt like an echo from another life. One morning, Emma came home early from work. She saw Michael sitting silently, holding a stack of unpaid bills. "Michael," she said gently, "you can't lose hope. The kids look up to you. I look up to you." Michael looked at her and said quietly, "I've been trying to be strong for everyone. But what if I can't anymore?" Emma took his hand. "Then let me be strong for you." They sat in silence. Sometimes, love doesn't need words, just presence. A few days later, Michael tried again. He walked to an industrial area and saw a small sign, "Help Wanted, Warehouse Assistant." He stepped inside, filled out the form, and waited. The manager looked through his papers, then shook his head. "Sorry, Mr. Turner. We need someone younger. Someone who can lift heavier loads." Michael smiled politely, thanked him, and walked out. But inside, he was breaking. That evening, as he walked home, rain began to fall. It started light, then poured hard, soaking him completely. He didn't run. He just walked slowly, as if the rain could wash away everything, the shame, the loss, the pain. When he reached the house, Emma rushed to the door. "Michael, you're drenched." He just said softly, "I didn't even notice." That night, when everyone was asleep, Michael sat alone in the dark. He looked at his calloused hands. Hands that had built houses for others yet couldn't save his own. He whispered to himself, "What am I doing? What am I supposed to do now?" He looked around the small, silent room. Then his eyes landed on an old toolbox lying near the corner, one of the few things that survived the fire. He walked over, opened it, and saw his tools burnt, rusted, but still there. A hammer. A screwdriver. A small saw. For the first time in weeks, something inside him stirred. He remembered how he used to fix old chairs and tables for neighbors, not for money, just for fun. He used to say, "Anything broken can be fixed with a little time and care." He sat there for a long time, looking at the tools. Then, a faint smile appeared on his tired face. Maybe, just maybe, this was a start. That night, Michael didn't sleep. As the city lights flickered outside, he began sketching an idea on a piece of paper, a small table made from scrap wood. It was simple. But it was something. And in that small, quiet moment, surrounded by darkness, Michael Turner, the man who had lost everything, took his first small step toward rebuilding not just his home, but his hope. The next morning, Michael woke up earlier than usual. The sun hadn't risen yet, and the streets outside were still quiet. He sat at the small table in the room they were renting and looked at the piece of paper he had drawn on last night. A rough sketch of a small wooden table. Simple. Ordinary. But something about it felt important. He looked over at the old toolbox again, the one he had found in the ruins of their house. Most of the tools were rusty, but they still worked. Michael picked up the hammer, turning it in his hand. It felt heavy but familiar, like holding a memory. For the first time in weeks, he felt a small spark of energy inside him. He walked outside and found some discarded wooden planks near a construction dumpster. They were broken, uneven, and full of nails. But to Michael, they looked like a chance of beginning. He carried them home, cleaned the dust off, and began cutting. At first, his hands shook. He hadn't built anything since the fire. But slowly, the rhythm returned, the sound of the saw, the smell of the wood, the feeling of creating something out of nothing. Emma woke up and walked to the doorway, watching him silently. "What are you doing, Mike?" she asked softly. Michael smiled faintly without looking up. "I'm building something," he said. "Just, something." She didn't ask more. She just watched as the man who had lost everything began to build again. By afternoon, Michael had finished the table. It was small, rough around the edges, but strong. He placed it in front of the window. Liam came over and touched it. "Did you make this, Dad?" Michael nodded. "It's not perfect," he said, "but it's ours." Sophie ran her hand across it and giggled. "It's beautiful." Emma smiled, her eyes softening. "I think someone out there might want to buy something like this," she said. Michael shrugged. "Who'd want a table made from trash wood?" But that night, she took a photo of it on her old phone and posted it online with a simple caption. "My husband made this from scrap. We lost everything, but he's trying to rebuild one piece at a time." The next morning, something unexpected happened. A message popped up on Emma's phone. A woman named Sarah Parker from the other side of town wanted to buy the table. She wrote, "There's something special about this. I'd love to have it." Michael didn't believe it at first. He cleaned the table, wrapped it in an old sheet, and delivered it himself. When Sarah opened the door, she smiled warmly. "This is beautiful work," she said. "Did you really make it from scrap?" Michael nodded. "Yeah. Just trying to make ends meet." She looked at him for a moment, then said, "Keep going. You have something rare. You make broken things beautiful again." She paid him $20, but what she gave him that day was far more hope. A week later, more people began messaging. Sarah had posted a picture of the table online, sharing Michael's story. People commented, "Wow, this is inspiring. Can he make one for me? A man who rebuilds after losing everything, that's art." Soon, orders started to come in, 1, then 2, then 5. Michael couldn't believe it. He began collecting more scrap wood from dumpsters, junkyards, and broken fences. He fixed each piece carefully, sanding, painting, shaping. Every table, every chair, carried a story. He started calling his little project Ashwood Creations. Because everything he made was born from ashes, just like him. But success didn't come easy. The work was slow. His hands hurt. His tools broke. Some nights he worked until dawn, while Emma slept beside the kids. Yet, each morning when he saw a new message or a kind comment online, it pushed him to keep going. Sometimes he doubted himself. "What am I doing?" he'd think. "This can't last." But then he'd remember Sarah's words, "You make broken things beautiful again." And he'd pick up the hammer once more. A few weeks later, a small local news reporter named Jason Clark reached out. He had seen Michael's work online and wanted to do a short story about it. When Jason arrived, he filmed Michael working with his hands, surrounded by wood shavings and half-finished chairs. He asked, "What made you start this?" Michael paused, then said quietly, "I lost everything, my job, my house, my peace. But I realized, maybe I was supposed to lose it all to find something new. Maybe I was supposed to build again, not just furniture, but my life." The video went viral. Thousands of people watched, commented, and shared his story. Orders came from nearby towns. People sent messages saying, "You gave me hope, and if he can start over, maybe I can too." That night, Emma sat beside him, scrolling through all the comments. She smiled through tears. "You see, Michael. You thought you lost everything. But maybe, you found yourself." He looked at his rough hands and smiled. "Maybe so," he said. For the first time since the fire, Michael laughed, a real laugh, the kind that comes from deep inside. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. Because now, he wasn't just surviving. He was rebuilding. And the man who had once watched his world burn was now creating beauty from ashes, one piece at a time. Michael Turner's life had finally started to shine again. His small workshop, once a corner of a borrowed garage, was now filled with tools, planks of wood, and laughter. Every morning, he opened the doors and let the sunlight fall across his handmade tables and chairs. The smell of fresh wood filled the air, a smell that meant hope to him now. People came from different neighborhoods just to buy his work. Some didn't even need furniture, they just wanted a piece made by the man who rebuilt from nothing. His business, Ashwood Creations, had become more than a way to earn money. It had become a story of second chances. One afternoon, while Michael was sanding a chair, his wife Emma rushed into the shop holding her phone. "Michael! Look at this," she said excitedly. On the screen was an article from a big online magazine. The headline read, "From Fire to Fame, Dallas Man Builds a Business from the Ashes of His Home." Michael laughed in disbelief. "That's me." Emma smiled, tears in her eyes. "Yes, that's you. You're finally getting the credit you deserve." The article brought in even more customers. Orders flooded his email. People wanted custom furniture tables with engraved names, chairs built from their old house wood, shelves that told stories. Michael couldn't keep up with all the requests. He hired 2 helpers, Carlos and Ethan, both men who had lost their jobs recently. He remembered what it felt like to be hopeless and wanted to give others a chance too. For a few months, life felt peaceful. But peace never stays forever. One morning, Carlos came running into the workshop holding his phone. "Boss, you need to see this." Michael wiped his hands and looked. It was a website for a large furniture company, Woodwave Industries, selling pieces that looked exactly like his. Same designs. Same names. Even the same style of photography. Michael stared at the screen, his stomach tightening. "They copied my work," he said quietly. Carlos nodded. "Exactly. And they're selling it for half your price." Emma came into the shop later that day and saw the look on his face. "What happened?" she asked. Michael handed her the phone. "They're stealing my designs. Everything I made." She looked at the pictures, then at him. "You can't let this stop you." Michael sighed deeply. "Emma, they have machines, factories, teams of designers. I just have 2 hands." She touched his arm and said softly, "Maybe. But your hands build with love. Theirs don't." For a few days, Michael felt lost again. Orders slowed down because people started buying cheaper versions online. His workshop grew quiet. The excitement that had filled his heart turned into fear. He thought about quitting. "Maybe this is it," he told Emma one night. "Maybe I had my moment, and it's gone now." But Emma shook her head. "No, Michael. They can copy your furniture, but they can't copy your heart." Those words stayed with him. All night, he couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, watching the stars, thinking about what made his work special. And then he realized it. It wasn't just about wood and nails. It was about stories. Every table he built carried a memory, a name, a message, a dream. That was something no factory could ever copy. The next morning, Michael made a decision. He took a small piece of wood and carved something into it by hand. "This table belongs to the Smith family. Built with love, for their new beginning." He looked at the carving and smiled. It felt alive, personal. From that day on, every piece he made had a story engraved into it. He began offering customers a choice. "Tell me your story, and I'll carve it into the wood." People loved it. A widow asked him to make a table with her late husband's name. A couple ordered chairs engraved with their wedding date. A family asked him to build a shelf from the remains of their old barn. Each creation carried emotion. Each one was one of a kind. And slowly, business returned. Not because he competed with big companies, but because he offered something they couldn't: soul. Soon, Ashwood Creations was busier than ever. The local news did another story, this time titled, "They copied his designs, but he made something they couldn't steal." The video went viral again. People all over the country started ordering from him. Michael hired more workers, single parents, veterans, young men who had lost direction, giving them all the same second chance he once needed. Emma stood by him through every step, managing orders, keeping the family together. At night, they'd sit in the shop surrounded by wooden pieces and laughter. "This all started from a few broken planks," Emma said one evening. Michael smiled and replied, "Guess broken things can still build something beautiful." But just as things started to look bright again, another letter arrived, this time from a lawyer. It was from Woodwave Industries, accusing Michael of using similar branding. They wanted him to change his business name or face legal action. Michael held the letter, anger rising in his chest. "They copied me, and now they want to destroy me." Emma looked at him and said calmly, "Then show them who you really are. Don't fight with lawyers. Fight with your heart." Michael looked around at the tables, chairs, and stories carved into wood, each one a symbol of love and strength. And that night, he began designing something new. Something powerful. Something that would remind the world who he really was. He picked up his hammer, and with quiet determination, whispered to himself, "You can take my name. But you'll never take my story." The next few weeks were the hardest of Michael Turner's life. The letter from Woodwave Industries sat on his workbench like a shadow, reminding him that even success could bring new battles. He could have given up. He could have changed his business name and stayed quiet. But that wasn't Michael anymore. The man who once cried over ashes had learned something powerful: you only lose when you stop trying. Michael decided to fight back in his own way, not with anger or lawyers, but with creativity. He designed a new collection, something personal, emotional, and deeply human. He called it the Heartwood line. Each piece would carry not just names, but full stories, engraved paragraphs about love, family, and second chances. The first table he made in this new line had these words carved beneath the surface: "Built from what was broken for those who never gave up." Emma ran her hand over the words and smiled through tears. "It's perfect," she whispered. Michael nodded. "It's not just furniture anymore. It's life." He posted photos online with a heartfelt message. "They can take your job. They can take your house. But they can never take your heart. Every piece I make now carries a story, because we all have one worth telling." Within hours, his post went viral. Thousands of comments poured in, not just from customers, but from people who saw themselves in his words. "I lost my husband last year. Can you make me a piece in his memory? Your story gave me hope after I lost my job. You reminded me that it's never too late to rebuild." Orders came from across the country. Reporters called again. One headline read, "Dallas carpenter turns pain into power, the man who builds hope." Soon, Ashwood Creations was no longer just a small workshop, it became a full business. Michael rented a bigger space downtown, painted the walls warm brown, and hung a sign that said, "Ashwood Creations, built from hope." He hired more workers: single mothers, veterans, young men trying to restart their lives, people who needed a chance, just like he once did. He taught them not just to make furniture, but to make meaning. "When you build," he told them, "you're not just shaping wood. You're shaping stories." Emma handled orders and messages, while Liam and Sophie helped design simple sketches after school. The family who once had nothing now had purpose. A few months later, something unexpected happened. Michael received a letter, this time not from lawyers, but from Woodwave Industries again. But this one was different. They weren't threatening him. They were offering a partnership. The company's CEO wrote, "Your story moved our entire board. We'd like to collaborate with Ashwood Creations to create a hope collection. Your designs, your name, your story." Michael couldn't believe it. Emma looked at the letter, speechless. "They want to work with you now." Michael smiled. "Maybe even big companies can learn what really matters." He agreed, but only on one condition: the collection had to include a note with every product, sharing the message that started it all. Each note read, This piece was inspired by Michael Turner, a man who turned loss into light. Months passed. Business grew faster than anyone expected. Michael used the profits to help others who were struggling, paying for tools, setting up training programs, and helping families rebuild homes lost to fire or disaster. He never forgot where he came from. Sometimes he'd visit the old lot where his first house had burned down. It was empty now, covered in grass. But he'd stand there quietly, remembering that night, the fear, the smoke, the silence. Emma once asked him, "Does it still hurt when you come here?" He smiled softly. "No," he said. "Because this is where everything began." One summer evening, Michael and his family sat around their dinner table in their new home, filled with laughter and warmth. Liam, now taller and older, looked around and said, "Dad, remember when we lost everything?" Michael nodded, smiling. "I remember." Sophie added, "And now you help other people who lose everything." Michael looked at them both and said quietly, "That's what life is about, kids. When you find light again, you don't keep it, you share it." Emma reached across the table and took his hand. "You gave us more than a second chance, Michael. You gave us a new life." Later that night, after everyone went to bed, Michael sat in his workshop one last time. The light was soft, and the smell of pine filled the air. He looked around at the tools, the wood, the photos on the wall, and felt peace. He picked up a small piece of wood and began to carve, slowly and carefully. When he finished, the words read, "Sometimes, you have to lose everything, to discover what truly matters." He placed it on the shelf above his workbench, a reminder of his journey, his pain, his growth. Outside, the wind rustled softly through the trees, the same trees that once gave him the wood to rebuild his life. And in that quiet moment, Michael Turner smiled. He didn't just build furniture. He built hope, one story, one piece, one heart at a time. The end. Sparkles, a story of loss, love, and the power of rebuilding.